Sky Daily changed the whole picture. What looked like a sudden heart attack is now a malpractice fight. The legend of Hulkamania just collided with a paper trail. CNN reported the official medical examiner ruling classified Hulk Hogan's death as natural, listing acute myocardial infarction at 71 years old. That is the clean line on the paper. But Yahoo, working off Clearwater Police body cam and a lockdown police report, put out a different claim entirely. An occupational therapist inside the house told officers that a surgeon had severed or badly damaged Hogan's phrenic nerve during a recent operation, calling it possible malpractice. Now look, that split is where the foundation cracks. You have a natural death ruling on one side and an on-scene allegation about a damaged nerve tied to breathing on the other. You knew the official cause was a heart attack. You didn't know an occupational therapist in the house flagged a severed nerve to the police, and that discrepancy opens a sprawling medical review. The official verdict came first, and it is plain. But once you hear phrenic nerve and breathing in the same sentence, you stop hearing about a bad patch and start hearing about fundamental function. Sky Daily said Hogan's phrenic nerve was compromised during a surgery in May. That one medical point changes the frame. She framed it like a steady weakening. She is saying he had been short of breath for months, and when breathing goes bad for months, the whole body starts paying for it. Here is where it turns. Hogan spent his whole life selling strength. Ripped shirt, big arms, giant pose, booming voice. Even after all the baggage piled up, the image was still power. So for the widow to come out and say the real story was shortness of breath, gradual decline, and possible nerve damage from surgery, that flips the myth on its head. It reminds you the legend still had lungs, still had nerves, and still had a body that could fail. The phrenic nerve detail takes the conversation out of the usual wrestling orbit and drops it in a medical one. Now the questions get sharper. What happened in that May surgery? Was the breathing issue known right away, and was it managed right? Truth is, that is where a lot of older fans live now with wrestling deaths anyway. Too many men gone too early. Too many stories that start with surgeries, medications, pain, weakness, and complications. So when Sky frames Hogan's last stretch as prolonged breathing trouble after a surgery in May, it hits a nerve with the audience because they have seen versions of that movie before. Same grim feeling. One procedure, one setback, and one problem that keeps dragging the body lower. Then somebody tells the public it was sudden, while the people close to the man start saying it had been going on. A man can look strong in memory and weak in real life at the same time. The audience just did not know what to call what they were seeing until she named the breathing problem. See, that is why the malpractice part hangs so heavy. Once the widow says she is investigating it, the audience hears what comes with that: records, timelines, surgeons, and follow-ups. What the autopsy says and what the doctors documented. What complications were known risks and what complications should never have happened. That is not locker room talk. That is file talk. And Hogan was the industry for a stretch. So when the end of a life like that gets attached to a compromised phrenic nerve and possible malpractice, it messes with the final page of a giant American wrestling story. Sky also reportedly said prolonged shortness of breath can weaken someone over time. She is fighting the idea that unless a man falls over in one dramatic instant, the decline was not serious. She is telling people weakness can be a slow drain. A man who keeps losing capacity day after day. If her account holds up, the end was not one surprise, but attrition, a wearing down, a little less air, a little less strength, and then the body runs out of runway. For a legend built on force, that is a rough thing to hear. Now think about what the people inside that Clearwater beach house actually watched. He was there when the May surgery happened. He was there when the shortness of breath started dragging on for months. He was there when the oxygen tanks arrived in his final weeks, as Fox News reported. He said nothing publicly until his heart finally gave out. When a 71-year-old icon goes into respiratory decline across 2 hospitals, you have to ask how much of his lung capacity was already gone before that final 911 call. That number has never been printed. Man, the family was not acting like the medical story felt finished. Sky Daily and Nick Balia filed together in a way that signals they were acting for the estate and preserving the option of a malpractice suit before the clock runs out. That is strategy. The reporting points to 2 hospitals and possible doctors being in the line of fire. If the estate later decides there is a malpractice case worth filing, that proves the family was acting like malpractice was live enough to protect against losing the chance to sue. Then you get Brooke Hogan stepping in with the offer to pay for a separate autopsy. If the official cause of death had put every concern to bed, why push for a separate autopsy at all? Brooke's offer shows she wanted an independent look at the medical side. Now think about what that means. You have Sky and Nick acting together in estate mode. You have Brooke signaling that the official account was not enough for her. That means the Hogan family, behind the public grief, was working two tracks at once. Legal preservation on one side and independent medical review on the other. In the wrestling business, families know the autopsy is not just a medical document. It can shape whether the story stays natural causes or turns into what the doctors missed and who looked the other way. Brooke's autopsy offer tells you she was not ready to let the first version sit there without another look. You knew the family hired lawyers. You didn't know the widow and son filed a joint petition reaching across Tampa General Hospital and Morton Plant Hospital, and that casts a net far wider than one bad surgical room. The Hill said the dual hospital filing suggests the family is probing a continuum of care. That means the earlier treatment may have set the table, and the final event may have been the last stop in the same decline. The iHeart source said the petition reportedly covers doctors and healthcare providers at both hospitals. That points toward a possible chain involving diagnosis, post-op monitoring, or referral decisions across facilities. They are acting like the answer may be buried in the handoffs, the follow-up, the monitoring, and the way one stage of care fed the next. Here's where it turns. Clearwater police called Hogan's death case unique. That word told you right away this was not some quick paperwork closeout. Police said they had to interview multiple witnesses and gather records from several medical providers because the facts were spread across home care, hospital treatment, and post-surgical follow-up. That is not a routine chain. They were trying to figure out whether the final collapse makes sense only if you trace the care backward, piece by piece. Reports said Hogan had a recent neck fusion procedure. Reports also said he dealt with shortness of breath and fatigue after that. And Fox News said he was on oxygen in the weeks before he died. That is the kind of detail that makes police go get records instead of just a summary. Listen, ABC7 said investigators wanted statements from family, the occupational therapist, and doctors across multiple facilities before releasing body cam footage or closing the case. That tells you the death scene alone was not enough. If the final call matched a neat little summary, they would not need to piece together a longer chain of care. The body cam only gives you the last page. Police were looking for the chapters before it, and you know what that means. The final answer may not live in the dramatic moment people want to watch. It may live in a follow-up note or a discharge summary. It may live in whether someone connected fatigue and shortness of breath to a bigger decline, instead of treating them like normal recovery complaints. Brooke drew the line fast. She was not talking foul play. She was talking medical doubt. She is saying the evidence she saw did not point to somebody attacking her father on purpose. That shuts down the loudest kind of criminal suspicion. The real fight, from her side, is between a natural death ruling on paper and a pile of medical questions that still do not sit right. She wants the focus on what medically happened, what may have gone wrong, and whether a chain of care left Hogan too weak to recover when he stopped breathing, which tells you plenty before anybody hits a witness stand. Once foul play is pushed aside, the spotlight lands right on the doctors, the treatment path, the surgery questions, the post-surgical complications, and the chain of care. That is where the heat is. In the records. In who said what, when, and why. In whether a body already beat up from years in the ring got pushed one step too far at the wrong time. Sky Daily's side was pursuing a malpractice route, while Clearwater police were still reviewing records and witness statements. Brooke, at the same time, was saying foul play looked unlikely. She is carving out space for uncertainty without feeding fantasy. See, the phrenic nerve is not some side issue. According to the Cleveland Clinic, that nerve drives the diaphragm. When that nerve gets damaged, the body can still look strong to a casual eye while the inside is slipping. Shortness of breath, fatigue, chest discomfort, and sleep trouble. In worst cases, diaphragmatic paralysis or respiratory failure. A 71-year-old body with years of ring damage is not walking around with the same reserve he had in the old days. Decades of bumps, back surgeries, and wear and tear from carrying that frame. If there was surgery, then months of breathing trouble, and then investigators looking at whether medical decisions worsened the decline. You are looking at a stressed system that may have lost its margin for error. They check the surgical notes. They check the referral timing. They check the gap between the patient suffocating and the provider acting. The NCBI material points to phrenic nerve injury in the setting of diaphragm problems and respiratory decline. Breathing is the base layer. When that starts slipping, the heart works harder. Public appearances can become performance in the most literal sense. The man is performing health while his system is spending itself. That Republican National Convention image weeks before death almost works against the truth here. Fans see the shirt rip and think life force. But those public images could coexist with a body losing breathing reserve. The gimmick stayed over while the engine underneath was failing. You knew the paperwork was thick, you didn't know the widow filed for a 90-day extension just to chase the timeline, and the hospital's lawyers are staring at that same clock. The widow does not need a promo, she needs the chart. If a phrenic nerve got injured during surgery, the record may show when breathing changed, when staff noticed it, what imaging got ordered, and whether the decline kept getting worse while people talked around the cause. Step 1, what happened in surgery? Step 2, what showed up after? Step 3, who knew the patient was heading downhill? Step 4, whether anybody moved fast enough to stop it. Now watch what happens next in a case like this. The hospital will lean on dry words. Complication, risk, consent, unfortunate result. But malpractice is about the chain. Was the nerve injured during the procedure? And if it was not recognized, should it have been? Did notes show worsening shortness of breath? Did anybody call for intervention and get ignored? Or did people keep charting symptoms while the real cause sat there staring back at them? The timeline in those notes can tell a whole story without anybody saying a word on camera. You look at whether one provider wrote one thing while another acted like nothing was wrong. You look for the moment where intervention should have kicked in but didn't. If a natural death ruling and a fatal medical chain of errors can live in the exact same file, which part do you trust? Half of you will say a heart attack at 71 is just God calling time. The other half will look at the May surgery, the months of breathing trouble, and the 2 hospitals, and say the system buried a legend. Which half are you? And what does that say about how much faith you still put in an official hospital statement? The business taught the boys to work hurt, hide hurt, and keep the machine moving. Admitting decline could get your push cooled or your payday cut. Hogan came from a generation where image was part armor. Keep showing up, keep smiling, keep being Hulk Hogan even when Terry Bollea is carrying the pain bill. That instinct stays alive. Show strength, sell confidence, keep the crowd with you. Put that mindset next to an injury that targets breathing, and you get a brutal setup, because breathing trouble is easy to minimize in public until it is not. A younger body can sometimes eat a mistake and claw back. An older body with years in the business and breathing trouble after surgery may not have that kind of cushion. Thing is, if the chart shows a worsening respiratory picture and delayed reaction, then what looked like one sad outcome starts looking like something else. If the records show the warning signs were there and the response lagged, now you are talking about whether somebody looked at a breathing problem and failed to treat it like the emergency it was becoming. That is why the widow's push matters. She is pressing on the timeline in the records. The 90-day extension is where the case gets built or breaks down. Experts read, lawyers compare notes, and entries get matched against treatment. The widow tries to prove this was negligence nobody wanted to name. The other side will try to frame it as a known surgical risk with a bad outcome. The medical examiner ruled it natural causes. The widow holds a 90-day extension to build a malpractice case against 2 hospitals. The police file sits on testimonies from a fractured care chain. Will the chart ever show exactly who let the breathing stop?